that meditation is about emptying the mind. Do we want to have an empty mind? I mean, it's not a bad thing, but if I have to train in something, emptying our mind from that incessant inner dialogue where we hear or we listen, and then when we just grasp at ideas and distractions. I mean, that is part of the process, but that's not the arrival point. Generating certain mental states, the goal is to familiarize ourselves with virtuous states of mind. But first we need to understand where we want to go and how to direct ourselves. Like, I want to go somewhere traveling. It's not enough to have a good car. I need to know how to drive, and I need to know where I want to go. Otherwise, it's like an acquaintance of mine many years ago. Sometimes I would run into him and he would tell me, I like cars. I change my car with every new model, and I use this car to go 100 meters because I like these new cars. So for him, the car was not a tool to go somewhere, but an end in and of itself. Meditation is not an end in and of itself. It's a tool. And this tool, the tool, so I need to know where I'm going, and I need to know how to get there. So if I don't know how to drive, or if I drive badly, I can have an accident, or I can So it's important to learn the technique of meditation, but we need to have clearly in our mind where we want to go, where we're going. This morning we talked a lot about where we're going, and this needs to be deepened and seen again and again. It's not something that you identify and then you just leave there. No, it needs to be seen again and again, because a danger that can come is that, okay, we decide I want to get there, we start, but after a while we forget about where we're going, or we see another place that attracts us more, or worse. We have our objective, but then we say, okay, this is my objective, but now I have other things to do. So it remains an idealized objective and not a real objective. So that's why it's very important to renew every session of meditation or ceremony or teachings. For example, we recite the verses in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I take refuge until enlightenment with the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I reach Buddhahood with the practice, with the training, generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. May I reach Buddhahood, or may I develop my qualities to their maximum potential for the benefit of all sentient beings, to help beings get out of their own suffering. So one is constantly renewing one's objective, the why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing. Because there's this danger that at a certain point one just recites automatically, oh, I'm Buddhist, I'm part of this identity, and after a while I could even forget what that all means. Instead, for us, it's really important to constantly to go back to that starting point and redirect ourselves. Let's remember that we're not here to be good Buddhists. We're here to gradually develop more wisdom, joy, love, and be a positive drop in a great ocean. As we just said, it's not enough to have this clarity of our objective. Like, that's one wing. We need another wing. And the other wing is a method. So I have my objective and I have my method. Because the other danger is I want, but I never get there. I never leave because I don't have the means. So for this afternoon, I wanted to talk more about the instrument, the method, and we've come down. I thought that the ceremony they did today, actually they finished this morning. I thought that they were going to continue this afternoon, but now we'll start actually with the techniques of meditation, and we need more space actually. So let's start with a little bit of theory, and then we can divide this theory into some practical steps. First of all, the definition of meditation. We could say that meditation is a state, a mental state, that is self-generated, not from an exterior force, like a place or a person or a substance, but it's a self-generated, and it mostly has the function of familiarizing ourselves with certain states of consciousness. I want to familiarize myself with this state of consciousness, and it's an exercise where we generate this, keeping the mind still on something, like taking the reins of our mind in our hands, instead of letting our mind just go wandering. One aspect of meditation in all traditions is it's a self-generated state. And one reason for this, it's something that we can do when we want, and is something much more stable when it's self-generated, because it is possible to generate certain states of concentration and levels of consciousness through substances or external situations, but it's possible to create a kind of it's a kind of addiction, and one doesn't have full control in that case. And instead, when it's self-generated, one has total control. As we said before, this morning meditation in Tibetan is called Gom. Gom literally means to familiarize oneself. We use the same word. I don't know. I need to get used to eating this food. The same word is used. It's this process of training. We generate certain mental states that we want to be familiar with, that we want to come spontaneously. So we could ask ourselves, meditation is an exercise, it's a spontaneous state, or it's something forced and artificial. It's artificial and forced because are we used to keeping our mind still on one object? Once we have familiarized ourselves in that in that way, then it isn't forced or or artificial. But at the beginning, it's like it's like going against the current. So the mind stays concentrated on one selected object. The object of meditation can be one's breath, an image, a concept, a feeling. Can be many, many things. It's said that any phenomenon that exists can be an object of meditation. So, based on that, one can meditate on anything. Obviously, the object itself becomes very important because when we meditate on something, we're familiarizing ourselves with that object of meditation. And it's said that it's not possible to meditate on nothing where there's no object of meditation. If you try to meditate on nothing, that nothing is actually the object of meditation. So when we meditate, we have an object, and it's important that the mind is resting on that object and it doesn't jump from one to the next. And this is something we need to develop at the beginning. So it's based on our own concentration, where the mind is able to stay on the designated object in a concentrated way. And the more advanced state is when that state of concentration, being concentrated on that object, is not tiresome, but it comes in spontaneously and is actually even physically pleasurable. So the first thing is we need to invert a tendency that we have. This tendency that we have of jumping from one object to another, of having our attention mostly on our senses that are perceiving external objects. And we need to also allow ourselves to simply rest our mind and to be present in the present moment. This is not that easy because we're just not used. Once we're able to rest our mind on something, that allows us to have a much greater level of concentration. And this is valid also for anything that we do. If we're present in what we do, write a letter, talk to someone, whatever it is, then we have much more concentration. It goes much, it flows much easier, and we don't use up as much energy. So this ability to concentrate is a very important aspect of meditation. It's a positive side effect of meditation. So meditation and concentration are not necessarily the same thing. Meditation requires concentration, but when we have concentration, we're not necessarily meditating, but the more we meditate, the more we develop our concentration. And concentration, in my opinion, is one of the most important qualities that we can develop. Anything we want to do, inside, outside, if we choose our direction and we can stay fixed on it, we'll be able to do much more. I think we've all had this experience to try to read something, for example, and as we're reading, maybe we're reading for 2 hours and we haven't understood anything. In a moment of good concentration, one could read the same thing in 10 minutes and have an understanding. It's a question of being present in what we do. We have a tendency of being taken by our past and our future. Even if we look at our suffering this morning, we talked about physical and mental suffering. We have mostly mental suffering. So mental suffering has to do mostly with past and future. When is it that we suffer from the present? I mean, the suffering of the present is much more physical, the pain of the present moment, but mental suffering is usually about something that has already happened or something that will happen. And it's just really important to bring ourselves again and again to the present moment. And an instrument that we have to bring us to our present moment is our own body. Try to imagine what it would be like if we didn't have our body to bring us to a present moment. What would be the tool? What would be the hook to take us to the present moment? In my opinion, we would get lost. It's difficult. When I try to imagine, I try imagining something, I go on and on. If there's not something that brings me back to the here and now, and then sometimes I think I've thought if we don't have a body, how does time work? That's another subject. But the point is, if we want to stay in the present moment, the most valid tool that we have is our body. That's why it said that when we meditate, one characteristic is bringing the mind where the body is, having both body and mind together at the same time. In the meditative process, there are two enemies, as we said before, this mental fogginess and mental agitation, and there are two antidotes, but mostly two states that we need to develop to be able to meditate well and develop meditative concentration, samadhi. They're called in Tibetan Lugi Shinjang. One is, and the Yigi Shingang. So flexibility of body and flexibility of mind. So where we say, stay here, the body stay here, and the body stays without effort. And the same for the mind. Mind stay here without effort. So maybe we at the beginning we sit down. What happens? Then the knee hurts, or I have an itch here. Oh, I need to stay here for 2 hours. I'll never manage. So there's a kind of physical malaise in sitting. If we try to keep our mind still on one thing, just the idea of keeping the mind on something brings anxiety. So first of all, we need to develop physical flexibility and then mental flexibility. And I think it's important that when we learn how to meditate is to not be in a hurry to know how to do everything, but instead to respect the steps. So to not be in a hurry to have great have great levels of concentration, and we need to start with the initial steps, which is about having physical flexibility. So it's our ability of being seated in a comfortable position, in a dignified way, let's say. We understand not to be seated with our back straight. And now we'll go into details about it. And we say, okay, I'm going to stay here in this position and see, and for a necessary amount of time. So there's an exercise at the beginning, I think is a very good start. Because if we try to train body and mind together, it's very tiresome. If we try to keep our body still and our mind still at the very beginning, it's very difficult. And we might lose hope and think that we'll never manage. Instead, we need to take baby steps. And that first step has to do with our body. So let's see. First of all, there's the meditation posture. It's said in many teachings that the correct posture already means a lot. And one reason is because the body and mind are directly connected. I don't know if you can feel it. If we sit with our back straight and at a certain point we slump, our mental state, our clarity, I mean, do you feel a difference or is it the same? My feeling is that if I'm slumped, I feel sleepier. I feel mental fogginess. And it's said that slumping generates sleepiness. And instead, if we have our back too straight with tension, that can generate mental agitation. So to keep our back straight, the position of our legs is very important because our legs will uphold our back. So it's very helpful to have a cushion, to sit on a cushion. First of all, if anyone has trouble sitting with their legs crossed, then it's absolutely fine to sit in a chair. I've heard people say, oh, I can't meditate because I can't sit with my legs crossed. No, it's not a prerequisite. Traditionally, since forever in the Buddhist tradition, one sits with the crossed legs. And the complete posture is called the seven or eight positions of Vairochana. And let's look at each one. The first are the legs. The legs are in the Vajra asana, or the Vajra position. And the complete posture is what we call the full lotus. You can see this more or less, where both feet are on top of the thighs. But it's first of all said to sit in a comfortable position. I'm used to sitting like this since I was young. And at 10 years old, it was easier. But also our body gets used to it. But let's not force anything. Because if we force something, then our attention goes to the pain in the knee, we don't want to get used to. We don't want to familiarize ourselves with pain. It's said to be the ideal position because sitting like this, with the legs like this, then the back is naturally straight. If this is too difficult, for example, I can sit like this well, but after about 20 minutes it starts hurting. So if I have to sit longer, then I sit in a half Vajra posture where one foot is under and one is on top of the thigh. Normally I put the right above and the left underneath. personally speaking, I prefer this position. But let's remember that the most important part is not how the legs are positioned, but that the back is straight. In Thailand, for example, they sit with one leg in front and the other one bent backwards. And a couple times I've sat like that, on retreat, for example. I had a little bit of pain in my leg. Feels a little strange at the beginning, but it works well too. The height of the cushion, you need to see what adapts best to you. At home, ideally, you have various heights of cushions. I have my own here. It's really one of my greatest objects of attachment. I bought it in Thailand, and it works really well for me. So if it's too high, it usually doesn't work so well. If it's too thin, it doesn't work either. So number one, the legs. So complete Vajra, and between the distance between one knee and the other should be the length of your forearm. But we don't need to be this rigid. So one legs, two back. So when we sit in when we put our legs in the correct position, posture, our back should be straight. We should feel like a kind of string that's pulling the top of our head. So our head is slightly forward and our back is straight without being tense. One legs, two back, three shoulders. Our shoulders are not too open and not hunched over. Something that happens often is that when one sits, it seems like the shoulders are relaxed, but they're actually tense. So when we sit down to meditate, we can move around a little bit, because if we sit down with a certain amount of tension, we generate tension that starts from our shoulder and then goes to the shoulder blades and can bring a lot of pain. Our head is slightly forward. Our hands. So the head, we're not looking up, we're not looking down, we're looking slightly forward. There are different postures for the hands, but traditionally we put the right hand over the left hand with the two thumbs that touch at the height of navel. So if you're seated if you're seated like I am, then you're at the right height. But according to the height of your cushion, etc., you'll see. I mean, there's some people you see they're trying to hold their hands at the height of the navel, but in the air, and that generates a tremendous amount of tension throughout the whole back. So if it's not the right height, you can take a kind of pashmina, a shawl, and rest your hands on top of this shawl. So we have our hands resting on either our lap or a shawl. So the right over the left, and the thumbs are touching at the height of the navel. Our back is relaxed. Our shoulders are very, very slightly forward. So one legs, back, two back, three shoulders, four hands, 5 head, 6 mouth. Our mouth is relaxed with our lips actually closed. Our teeth are not touching, and the tip of our tongue, and our tongue touches our palate. It's a little difficult at the beginning, but when one sits for a longer period of time without moving, if you don't keep your tongue like this, then you start accumulating saliva in your mouth. And then you have to, without doing this, you have to constantly swallow the saliva, or you start you start you start salivating, or like letting your saliva fall. So this contact with the palate is like a child putting the thumb in his mouth. Geshe Yeshe Wanchuk used to say that. It relaxes the body. 7 eyes. Our eyes shouldn't be very closed or completely open. So our eyes are gently closed, looking downward. There are techniques of meditation where one looks up or even looks backwards. In the Tibetan tradition, we look towards downwards. Some say it's easier to meditate with our eyes closed. It is easier to generate visualization or concentration, but it's less stable. So long term, it's better to start right from the beginning with our eyes slightly closed. Because if they're completely closed, we generate mental torpor. If they're open, we generate mental agitation. If they're slightly closed, nothing's in focus. We're not looking at anything in particular, but light still filters in. So they're more closed than open. So 1 legs, 2 back, 3 shoulders, 4 hands, 5 head, 6 mouth, 7 eyes. The hands also, they create a kind of triangles at the side of the body. The positions that I know for the legs are crossed legs, or like in Thailand with one leg bent backwards. There are other positions, but it's important that it adapts well to your body and that the position keeps your back straight. One of our masters from Thailand, Lupo Tata, he developed in his temple in Bangkok, their offices where he made wooden chairs to keep the back straight. There in the back, there's a kind of it makes like a half moon that's a little bit rigid, but it naturally brings the back to be straight. So these are the positions that has been certified, let's say, for the last 2,000 years. So we can say in 2,000 years, looking back since 2,000 years, people have meditated in this position and it's worked for them. But masters like Marpa, they really praised greatly the correct meditation posture, because it's a posture that has the function of avoiding mental torpor and mental agitation. It's a position where we are relaxed, but we're not just slouching. It's the antithesis of being on the couch at the end of the day, for example, where one is relaxed, but one is present. One is in control. The people ask me if I can meditate lying down. I say try. The problem of of meditating lying down is that it generates mental heaviness, mental fogginess, and sleep. It really depends on what your objective is. Maybe it's to fall asleep. So posture is quite clear. 1 legs, 2 back, 3 shoulders, 4 hands, 5 head, 6 mouth, and 7 eyes. And the 8th posture, because it said the 7 or 8 postures of Vairochana, and the 8th position would be our breath. It's a breath that's not forced, but that gradually becomes more profound, becomes deeper. So when we sit down to meditate, is also, regardless of what you're going to meditate on, at the beginning, we observe our breath. We allow our breath to become deeper. And possibly we try to breathe in 4 phases. So there's the phase of inhaling, holding, exhaling, and holding. Then we inhale, hold, exhale, and hold. These are the 4 phases. And it's important not to force any of them. We shouldn't try to inhale longer or exhale longer. We generate the awareness of our breath. We breathe in with more awareness, observing the 4 phases. And this naturally takes us to breathing more deeply. Is this clear up till here? The first exercise, it's I think an extremely important exercise. It's an exercise before meditation. It's a preparation. It's a preparation to develop physical flexibility. And what we'll do, and we can do it is without too much explanation. So we sit down in the correct posture and we generate the intention. I'm going to sit here without moving. It doesn't matter where our mind goes as long as I am physically still. I think we can last 3 hours and 15 minutes. Actually, what happens is at the beginning it's difficult. But little by little it becomes easier and easier until it becomes actually pleasurable. When it becomes pleasurable just to be seated still, then one is more ready to direct one's mind. So, the exercise is about sitting correctly, observing one's breath, and then deciding that we stay here. If we start scratching here and there, don't do it, because if you start, it won't end. It's interesting to see, because if an itch comes, one thinks, oh, if I scratch here, then it'll pass. No, if you scratch here, then it will itch somewhere else. So when a sensation comes, a slight pain or a need to scratch or an itch, we say to ourselves, this will pass. And we try to not identify ourselves with that sensation. And what's interesting is we try to keep our mind free. We're not holding the mind to anything particular. It's not a meditation. It's a preparation for meditation. And like in everything, preparation is extremely important. And when the preparation is done well, then everything else comes easily, like preparing a really good meal. If we have the right ingredients and and we have all the right conditions, then the meal will come well. If you want to think about a movie that you saw or reflect on something in particular, or what's important is being aware of our body and keeping our body still. I will ring the singing bowl a couple times. The singing bowl, the sound in this case, the function is to bring us back to the present moment, because the body brings us back to our present, also the sound and bring us to the present moment. Okay, so we sit down in a comfortable position. With our backs straight but not tense. Our shoulders are relaxed. And if for someone the position of the hands is too difficult, perhaps you don't have anything to rest your hands on, you can also keep your hands on your thighs, on your knees. Our head is slightly bent forward. Our mouth is relaxed. The tongue touches our palate. Our eyes are slightly closed, looking downwards. We observe our own breath. We allow our breath to be natural without forcing it. We simply observe it. We allow ourselves to be present here and now, to rest our body in this moment, in this position. For a little bit of time, we stay still. When we inhale, we gather up all the tensions in our body. And when we exhale, we let go of these tensions. It's like gradually we allow our body to rest on a deeper level. We gather up all the tensions that have accumulated in our head, in our shoulders, in our chest, every part of our body gradually. When I exhale, we melt these tensions. We inhale and exhale. We allow our body more and more to rest, to relax in this present moment. And when we inhale, we try to gather the tensions, the more subtle and deeper tensions. Little by little, we can move our hands and open up our eyes. This exercise, it's an exercise that should be repeated. It's a great exercise to do even when one has to wait. For example, you're waiting for the bus or the plane, or one gets to an appointment early, or you're at home and you don't know what to do. And need to wait for bedtime. I don't know. For example, I did this a lot when there were debate sessions, and there were these long periods where before doing the actual debate, there were many many prayers that were recited, and you weren't allowed to bring any books, any text. You needed to know or recite by memory. There was one in particular of Siddhapatra that took about 45 minutes, and I was there. I didn't know what to recite, and so I started doing this game playing this game with myself, and there was a tremendous amount of noise. There were mosquitoes, and it was difficult at the beginning, but day after day, week after week, at a certain point, it becomes hard to actually move, not just staying still, not staying still. So it becomes easier and easier, something you can feel at a certain point. It's almost as if the body becomes one thing. At the beginning, one feels the different parts of one's body, the hands, one hand on top of the other. But then at a certain point, there's no real separation between the parts of the body. It becomes all of one. It's normal for one part of one leg to fall asleep, for example. Nothing. There's no risk. It'll come back. So by doing this, it gets easier, and then you'll have less fear of sitting, because when we sit down, we're worried, we're afraid that we're going to feel pain, or that we'll feel agitated and we'll need to move. But by creating this habit of sitting still, it becomes actually pleasurable. And when sitting in a meditation posture is not only not painful, but is actually pleasurable, then one has reached the flexibility of body. And it takes some repeating. That was about 20 minutes that we did. We can repeat 20 minutes, 10 minutes. I advise you to do this without looking at your watch. And then you sit down, and when you see that it's not comfortable, then you can stop. And it could be more or less that amount of time. It's important to end the exercise before it becomes too uncomfortable, because if you push too much and it becomes truly unpleasant, then one won't want to repeat it. So if it's too hard or creates a malaise, the next time that one needs to repeat it, there will be some kind of resistance, and one can think of a thousand excuses to not do it. So it's important to end when it's still, if not pleasurable, at least not too unpleasant, and let the process be natural. We shouldn't be there counting the minutes, but little by little. Maybe once one has finished, one can glance at the clock and just see how much time, more or less, went by. And then gradually one can stay longer and longer. And then you'll see that it's different if you do it in the morning, if you do it in the afternoon, or in the evening. Generally speaking, it's said that the best time to meditate is the morning, because the mind is fresher, there are fewer thoughts. But in the morning, before actually beginning your day, because if you're already into the list of to-dos, and then you try to sit to meditate, it becomes very difficult. Or at the end of the day, you have all the thoughts that have accumulated. And at the end of the day, one feels physically more tired. But it depends on each person's predisposition. For myself, for example, the morning for me was very difficult for many, many years. I would go to sleep very late, and I liked sleeping late, and I put a tremendous amount of effort into getting up early for many, many years. in the monastery, for example, and I would go to sleep very late. I would have to wake up early, and I would nap after lunch. But you need to see how you are. And now it's been a couple of years that I've changed my ways. Let's say in this period, I see that it's much better to meditate in the morning. But you need to see your own lifestyle, you need to respect also your body. There's no fixed rule that goes for everyone, but it's important to create a habit. And this exercise, there's creating the habit of the body, where one loses that fear of sitting, the fear of pain. And then ideally, when you do this exercise, before getting to the next point, you at the beginning, you just let your mind go wherever it wants to go. It's very important to not try to constrain the mind to something. Just let your mind be free and relaxed. And you'll see that the mind just wanders. As the Panchen Dosen Chökyi Gyaltsen says, it's like a bird that takes flight from a boat that's in the middle of the ocean. It goes and flies and flies and flies, but then it needs to come back to the boat. So in this present moment, we start in this present moment, and we need to come back to this present moment. One error that is done when one tries to meditate is trying to force the mind to meditate on something. Oh, I shouldn't think about anything else. I need to just think about my breath. And one puts all the energy there, and one is holding and constraining the mind. And if we do in this way, maybe at the beginning it seems like it's working, but it's really not. It generates tension. It's tiresome to uphold over time. So when we let the mind just go, at a certain point, the mind gets tired wandering and looks for a place to rest. It's like we let it free, and then at a certain point, the mind naturally looks for a place to calm down, to rest. And at that point, we calmly and gently, we welcome that need, and we let our mind rest on our own breath. We bring our attention to this present moment, and we let it rest, not like an action of constriction, but as an actual result of the process. We're not constraining, but we're just allowing it naturally to look for that space to rest. It doesn't work if we create that tension. That meditative state is without tension, or we force the mind. It's where we rest our mind on an object, and the mind is resting from distractions. Is this clear? Is the difference clear? Let's look for an example. Reading, for example. I've had both experiences where I've had to study something that I really wasn't keen on studying, so kind of forcing myself to have to read something, and then also studying something, having to read about something I was very interested in. And at that point, everything else just vanishes because I'm so absorbed. So when we allow ourselves to get absorbed by what we're doing, we're actually resting our mind. We're not forcing our mind. Instead, when we try to read something and we have to understand it in that moment, and we're forcing the mind, it becomes tiresome. We're rebels. We don't want to be forced to do things. And with meditation, it's the same thing. In this first exercise, we simply let the mind go where it wants, and we focus on our body, and we focus on being present in the present moment with our body, and we use our breath to melt our tensions. So we scan our body, and we see where the tensions are, and it depends on each one, but normally there's tension in our shoulders, in our back, in our head, and so we direct our breath. We bring our air to that point in our body, to that tension, and when we exhale, we relax those tensions. And we start with the more coarse level tensions until little by little we recognize more subtle tensions. 10 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, until it becomes something really accessible, something possible. Something that's important is mostly at the beginning. We shouldn't, even the pre-meditation, or we're not meditating yet, but we should do more shorter sessions and not have sessions that are too long. Even when we really start meditating, it's much better to do shorter sessions instead of a very long session. If we're not used to it, we force too much, and then we won't want to do it again. So that first exercise is quite easy, isn't it? You don't need some kind of degree in meditation techniques. It's quite simple. I've always said it's not a the problem is not about knowing how to meditate. The problem is actually meditating, because the techniques at the beginning, that's very simple. There's not much to discuss. It's about doing, and to meditate, it's to be able to meditate, we need to create space to meditate. If there's not space in our lives to meditate, we won't meditate. How much time do we have available to meditate in a day? 24 hours. It depends on the priorities that we have. There are 24 hours in a day. We choose how we want to use those 24 hours. When we say, I don't have time, it's not true. You have time. The question is, what priorities do you have? What priorities do you give? And going back to what we talked about this morning, what do you want? People say, Lama, I'd like to meditate in the morning, but I don't have time. Why? Oh, because I have to go to work early. I get up early. And so what time do you need to be at work? I need to be at work at 7:30, just to say any time. 7:30. So what time do you wake up? I wake up at 5:30. And so how do you calculate that? Because I need 40 minutes to get to work. I need to have breakfast, and then I need to take a shower. So what does this mean? This means that you have given priority to your daily activities. Add 15 minutes to meditate. Maybe you don't need to read the news or do something less. Does someone go to work wearing pajamas? when I was a kid, like 10, 11 years old, I loved sleeping in the morning. So I would go to sleep wearing my clothes for the next day, even my shoes. So that way, when I would hear the horn, for the school bus, I would go directly from bed to the bus. That was just kind of pre-adolescent games. So the question is, do I want to dedicate time to meditate or not? Is it part of my priorities or not? It's all there. It's a question of priority. Because when we create time, at that point, the time is there. And this space needs to be created mostly. We should create a temporal space and a physical space. Not just in the organization of your day, but also in our lives. Because it's interesting how the the availability we have for one thing or another is not really about external necessities, but mostly about our inner projections. Today I need to do this. And we have decided that that is something that we need to do, that we want to do, and somehow that's part of our day. So to create this temporal space, there's a magical tool that is called our agenda. Our calendar. One writes from this time to this time. Maybe if you start with 1 week. From this time to this time, I'm going to meditate. And strangely, once you've written it down, it's something you have to do. This is my own personal experience. Okay, what do I need to do today? What's written in my agenda? Meditate. Why do I need to do it? Because I've written it down. So we can spend hours talking about this aspect, this imputation of the name, etc. But the point is that it works. If I don't put in my agenda that I need to meditate in my daily life, then what happens? When I feel like meditating, I do. When I don't feel like doing it, I'll find excuses not to do it. And as it happens, if you stop for 1 day, you stop for 3 months. This is how it works. So we set an objective for 3 weeks, one month, 2 weeks. We say for 2 weeks, I'm going to do this exercise for 15 minutes a day. It's important that when we set an objective, that objective should be just a little bit less than what we think that we can do, not the opposite. It's very important to maintain that that commitment that we've set. Sometimes from enthusiasm, we take all sorts of commitments that we can't uphold. Instead, if I think I can do 100, then I take the commitment to do 70 or 50, depending on some are so enthusiastic or others that are more cautious. But we take the commitment that's always a little bit less than what we think we can do. And then we create this temporal space. This creates space in our mind, and this also creates space in our day. Unfortunately, most of us don't have our day completely free. There are things that we do that have to do with our livelihood or interaction with the society, or responsibilities, or those who work or have to take care of children or the house, or so many things that we have to do. So within this, we need to manage the best way possible our space. And the best way is to really direct this power of intention and this commitment. I take the commitment. I am going to do this for, at this time, for this amount of time. Remember, a short commitment, giving a very high level of respect to this commitment we've taken. I'm tired. I'm going to do it anyway. I don't feel like it. I'm going to do it anyway. I remember again Lakpala, among the many recitations and practice he did, and he worked tremendously. He was the administrator of the monastery, and sometimes he would come home and he would recite, and sometimes he would fall asleep while reciting, and then when he would wake up, he would start from the beginning, and then he would fall asleep again, and not more, and more than once he spent his whole night like this, but he never gave up. Very often, we would say, today I'm so tired. If I'm not going to do it well, better not do it at all. And then we just drop it. Instead, if I've taken the commitment for 15 minutes for 2 weeks, we respect that commitment and keep that commitment. This makes a huge difference, because one thing that makes a principle difference is not really our predisposition for meditation, but our ability to maintain constancy. There's an example with this story that's told where there was a master. Unfortunately, I've forgotten the name. Often I forget names. I can't say forgot. Maybe I'm not very attentive when I hear the names. So there was this master who had many disciples, and there was one that wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. Had a hard time understanding things, but it was always there. And one day, this master was leaving for a faraway trip, and traditionally, at the moment of leaving, all the disciples come. They are in a line to say goodbye, and as he walked by him, and the disciple said, "Master, what's the practice of my life? I mean, this is a terrible time." Had been with him for years, many teachings. Right at the moment of departure is not the time to ask him such a thing. So he answers, with a joke, in an affectionate and joking way. He said, "Meditate until you develop a horn on your head." And ends there. Then he comes back after some time. He doesn't see that disciple, and he thought, oh, maybe I was too hard on him, and he was upset with my joke. And months go by, and then one day, maybe 3 years at this point, he went to another disciple and said, "Do you know anything about this disciple? And go ask around in the village what's happened to him." Then they come back to the master. At the time, of course, no internet, no phones. They had to go walking throughout the villages, and they go back to their master, and they say, "It's said that." They say that he's meditating in a cave up in the mountains, and the master told them to go find him. So they did one day, and they saw him spending his days meditating with a horn on his head. And it says, "The master's asking about you." "Oh, thank you, thank you." And then they go back to the master, and there he is in the cave meditating with a horn on his head. "Okay, tell him to come back and find me." So another 4 days walking through the mountains. And "You should come back. The master wants to see you." And he says, "No, I can't. Because I can't leave the cave because the horn is too big." So they went back to the master, and the master says, "No, tell him that he needs to meditate so that the horn dissolves." And after 3 days of meditating, he was able to get rid of this horn that took him 3 years to develop. When he goes to the master, he had mental clarity, a level of concentration that was so strong. He received teachings from the master. He had he had better understanding than all other disciples and was able really to realize these teachings. This is a story that's often told about the power of determination and constancy. And very often I've seen this. Those who have a strong predisposition sometimes, how can I say, they relax in their own abilities. And it's bad. It's someone who's not that able needs to put more effort. And that, put with constancy, brings better results than the one that has such great predispositions. I lived in the monastery, and there was a monk, and his nickname was Iron Ring, because memorizing is very important in the Tibetan Buddhist studies. Usually it's about 100 pages a year, and this boy, that's at 4 lines a day, and this one was not able to memorize even 2 lines, and finally his teacher was so fed up, he took this little metal ring, and he put it on, he said, put this here on the text, and the words that are inside the ring, those are the words that you need to memorize. And every day he would put down the ring, and he needed 3 or 4 hours a day to memorize what was in the ring, and he without ever skipping a day. And after 20 years, he knew more than those who had memorized the 100 pages a day. I saw that myself. Someone who has constancy, that is worth much more than any predisposition for something. And the same thing for physical exercise. When I read the story of Joseph Pilates, for example, I think you've all heard about Pilates. Maybe some of you actually do Pilates exercise. I tried once. I'm not really great at exercising. And in the story of Joseph Pilates' life, he was born with a sickness, or he has rickets, very weak, always with fever. And his father, instead, he had a gym, and he dreamt of becoming an athlete. And they let him do things in the gym, you do, but kind of not joking, but not really doing. But he was there, spending more hours than others, and he was able to actually cure his own sickness with the exercises that he was doing, and they developed his own methodology, etc. When someone starts from a need, and it's not easy, very often that initial difficulty is what that difficulty turns into to great things. Instead, if there's a natural predisposition for things, then one doesn't put the effort in. One thinks, oh, well, if I don't do it today, I can do it tomorrow because it comes to me easily. And then one actually realizes very little. So our constancy is a very important key. Also because there's this fundamental concept that wherever there's interaction, inevitably there's transformation. And what I do mentally today, it builds my tomorrow. So if I do, it's not just about what if I don't meditate with constancy. It's about what I'm doing when I'm not meditating. I mean, if we take the word meditation, gom, which literally means to familiarize. So when we're not meditating, we're familiarizing our mind with something else. If we watch a movie, we're familiarizing our mind with something, with distraction. When we're complaining, we're familiarizing ourselves with something. So we meditate a lot, actually, in the sense of familiarizing ourselves. The question is, are we familiarizing ourselves with something virtuous and positive or not? Because we don't have the choice as to familiarize ourselves or not, to train or to not train. We don't have this choice. We are always training in something. The more I complain, the more I will complain, for example. The more I act in one way, the more I'm familiarizing myself with that. So constancy in meditation is important, but we also need to bring our awareness, our presence together when we are not meditating. They go together. So we create a temporal space and a physical space. So a normal house, how many different areas does it have? How many rooms or in a normal livable house, there's a bedroom, a living room, and a kitchen, a bathroom, right? More or less is like this. So why do we need a living room and a bedroom? Why can't we just use one room to cook, to have a den and have a bedroom? Because we give importance to different activities. We have a room dedicated to sleeping. We need to eat. We have a room dedicated to eating. We want to read, watch TV, to socialize. We have a room dedicated to that. Just look at houses that decades ago, the architecture of decades ago. The bedrooms were small and the living rooms and the kitchens were very large. Today, instead, the living rooms are small, but the bedrooms are enormous. And very often, in the city, the kitchens are almost non-existent. It's no joke. I heard a short time ago today in the United States, about 1/3 of the population does not know how to cook. I was shocked. Okay, let's leave that subject. Anyway, so we dedicate spaces according to our activities. Someone who is a musician probably will have a room dedicated to practicing music. This reminds me of a disciple in Brazil who built a new house, and in the center, in the middle of the house, he had a room for all of his trophies, prizes, his trophies. Had many trophies for horseback riding, and it was really at the center of the house. So there's a room, to show his prizes. And when he started following teachings, etc., he transformed. He took all his trophies. He put them in the basement, and he transformed that room into a meditation room, to say, better, instead of nourishing my ego, I need a place where I can work on that. But the point is, we should have a space where a space to dedicate, a space dedicated to meditation. Because if we want to meditate, we say, well, where am I going to sit? So someone who has a larger house and can take an area that is dedicated to spiritual practice, that's wonderful. So there's an area dedicated to prayer, to reading, to practice. It's an area or nothing else. Nothing is done that is not connected to the spiritual practice. I need to send a message. I need to watch something. Then I leave that space. I do that somewhere else, because what we do actually influences and builds the energy of that space. If we live in a house where we don't have the space to dedicate that, we can also just use a corner or just even have a little rug, for example. When I put down this cushion, or when I use this rug, I use this exclusively. I use it exclusively for my spiritual practice, and I find a place in the house where I can sit comfortably, or put down the rug, put down the cushion, the small cushion. And this helps us create a physical space. And this is also really important. So we need to create temporal space and physical space. Also because the lack of space is defined as an obstruction too. When there's no space for something, then it's said that there's obstruction for that something, for that thing. The lack of obstruction for that thing means that there is space for that thing. So we need to take away the obstructions to meditation, obstructions within our own mind, and also physically, and also temporal obstructions. Something that helps this exercise that we did just before is, how can I say? If we want to meditate and we're afraid of pain or being tired, oh, but after a while it hurts, after a while it's tiresome, after a while here and there, that blocks us. Instead, if we say, no, I can manage, I can do it. Yeah, it hurts a little here, it hurts a little there. It doesn't matter. And I don't give any weight to that. It's like when Atisha said to his disciple Trompa, this 11th century master, he said, oh my child, don't be afraid of suffering. And Trompa answered, how is that? If I'm not afraid of suffering, I'll suffer even more, because if I'm not afraid of suffering, I won't try to avoid suffering, I'll suffer even more. And Atisha said, no, because the fear of suffering makes us suffer even more. This pre-suffering, and with meditation, it's the same thing. Oh, tomorrow there's a practice that starts early. Oh, that's so tiresome. And so today I was talking about this with the abbot of Serpom, or yesterday. We live in an epoch where we've become sop, a little bit soft, in the sense we're not used to working hard for something. When we were in Tibet, once there was a master and explained to me that early in the morning I was there, and there was this young boy that was bringing 24 to 25 liters of water on his back, and I said, why not bring running water to you? I mean, they had the resources to do that. It's not difficult. And my master gave me a very clear answer. He said, if young people don't learn from a young age to have constancy in putting effort and putting effort and into things for such basic things like water, how will they develop this constancy and effort for things that are seemingly superfluous, like meditation? We live instead under the law of minimum effort and maximum comfort. And so what happens, unfortunately, is going against habits is not necessarily pleasurable. It's tiresome. It's a lot of work. To say, someone who's used to talking all the time, it's difficult to be quiet. Someone who is mostly quiet, it's difficult if they have to speak. It's difficult to go against our own habits. But when certain habits are not healthy, we need to generate the opposite habit. It's tiresome. It's normal. So the less amount of fear that we have, the less fear that we have for getting tired or feeling pain, the greater our probability of keeping our commitments and maintaining this constancy. If I'm leaving for a trip and I'm ready for anything, the car breaks down, I get a flat tire, okay, it's part of the trip. The same thing for relationships among people. When we have an idealized image that everything's roses and roses and flowers, and that when one encounters that first difficulty, one says, "Okay, goodbye." No. Instead, when we talk about this patience that's similar to armor, where I say, I know that there will be moments of difficulty. I'm going to prepare myself mentally for the worst. And when I do that, what actually happens isn't so bad. And it doesn't block me. I keep going on. When we talk about our spiritual practice and meditation, this is also important because it's a question of constancy. So a fundamental point is maintaining this constancy day after day, month after month, without too much attachment to any kind of immediate result. We learn along the way. It's not something, it's a gradual process. We don't even know really where we're starting from. Maybe someone has a greater predisposition for one aspect and less for another. Like one of my master, again, Lakpala said one day, he told me, this meditation practice, is the sadhana of Yamantaka, he said that he did it every day without ever missing a day since he was 17 years old. It takes about a half an hour to do if you do it quickly. And he was about 70 something when he told me this. He said, I started understanding the practice when I was about 50. So more than 30 years of doing it every day, I started to understand what I was doing. It was someone who was able to transform himself in a marvelous way. But he had this constancy. He used to wake up every morning at 3 in the morning. And from 3 to 6, he would do his practice and his meditation. And he would do also his evening practices at the end of the day. And it didn't matter if the day, if he had spent 20 hours in the bus that day, every day. It's also difficult. It's difficult in our modern time. The part of knowledge, for example. Let's say we find correct instructions. I mean, how many things are written, or there's videos or audios on the internet. You can obtain anything and everything. So the information is there. The books are there. We can be guided by many, many masters. But the most delicate point that I see in the times in which we live is our constancy. And this is a little generalized. And we shouldn't feel this personally, thinking, oh, I can't manage. But we need to put more effort into our constancy, give greater weight to this aspect. And another aspect is that there's no hurry to do advanced practices. Should have constancy, but starting from the simplest of things. And naturally, one thing brings to the next. I'm not saying, oh, you need to stay and meditate for 3 years so that a horn grows on your head. No, let's start by being still, breathing, and then we're going to add some exercises. But they're simple things. What's important is that we do something that goes against what we want to change. This mind, that this monkey mind that can't stay still with itself. It's quite simple. What we're saying, I don't think there's any great novelty. It's a process that we can do together, a kind of analytical meditation too. Analytical meditation is this process of repeating a concept. It's a logical process where we get to a conclusion, and there too we need to repeat it, because the conscientiousness is something that is often lacking. Conscientiousness is being aware of what we already know. For example, if I asked you, are you mortal or immortal? Understood in this life, will you have to die? Is there anyone here who thinks that he is or she is immortal? No. So we are going to die. Yes. Are you sure? Yes. No doubt. No. In the morning, are we aware of this mortality? When we meet someone and say goodbye to someone, are we aware that we don't know if we're going to see this person again, or if we're going to see this person again, or if we're going to see our next life first? So theoretically we know, but it's not part of our awareness in the present moment. So in the process of meditation, it becomes important gradually to develop conscientiousness on the points that we want to familiarize ourselves with. If I want to meditate on something, I need to bring my presence to that aspect, and we use analytical meditation for that too. So there are three types. There are 3 types of meditation: Qigong, analytical meditation, single-pointed meditation, and shar means to arise. Shargom is where one looks back at a path. It's a state of meditation. Like, for example, I want to go from here to India. What steps should I take? Okay, first I need to go here, and then I need my visa, and then I need to buy my tickets, and I look at all the steps of what I need to do to get there. So there are meditations where we look at these spiritual steps or meditative states. The single-pointed meditation instead, where we place our mind on an object of meditation and we leave it there. And instead, analytical meditation is when we choose a subject and we enter into an inner process that is similar to trying to convince someone about something. And we get into a logical process of explaining, for example, the certainty of death and the certainty of death and the uncertainty of the moment of death. So imagine trying to explain that to someone, and one goes through that process. It's something you already know until you have that feeling, I know I'm going to die, I don't know when, and you're doing an analytical meditation on the certainty of death, or for example on the preciousness of this life. And it's almost like trying to it's no then you do it so that it to the point that it's not just conceptual, but one actually feels it. And once you've concluded the analytical meditation, then you do the single pointed meditation, and you can do it. This analytical meditation, you can do it out loud by yourself. You can do it in a group, silently, or by yourself silently. We take a argument, we take a subject we already know, and we go through this process to get to a conclusion, something that we already know. Tomorrow, we'll talk about the details of the analytical meditation. But even analytical meditation is based on concentration, on the present moment. And even here, it's really important to start with the flexibility of body. Just allow ourselves to be. Theoretically, without doing anything. It's strange for us because we're used to always having to do something. Oh, I need to see something, I need to do something. In this moment, one is simply there and one's doing a lot, even though it seems like one's not doing anything, because being still, we're going against this habit of having to always move. It's not just a physical stillness, but also we're not constantly looking for distractions or needing to listen to something or to do something. We're going really against the current, and it's a simple exercise. Is there someone who doesn't think that they can do it? You can do it. So I invite you to try to repeat it. We'll have this evening, we'll do this practice again together without pushing too many other things. Let's just stay with some simple things, because what I believe is the more complicated things I went to study, the more I realized how simple really it all was. We don't need to complicate things too much. Even though I know we like complicated things. And I had this intention to read a text together. Maybe we can do this the day after tomorrow, just to open up, how can I say, this more intellectual part of ourselves. There are some texts that are beautiful, and they're quite complicated. It's almost as if the more complicated it is, the more worthy it is. So now we'll stop here. If I remember well, we should pick up again at 6:30 until 7:15 to do meditation together. Something's important. When we're not here in the Gompa, meditating or following teachings, and when we're in other moments, let's try also to be in a training space, which means to be in a space of awareness. And we'll talk more about that. But our ability to be aware of what we're doing. I'm walking, I'm walking, I'm sitting, I'm sitting, I'm eating, I'm eating, I'm listening, I'm listening, I'm eating, I'm eating. Try to be present in what we're doing and not as I'm here, I'm somewhere else without mixing up everything. And possibly until Sunday night, try to limit as much as possible your access to that precious object of yours, and we know what we're talking about. So try to have as fewer distractions as possible. Use your phone as really as needed, and if you have a doubt, don't do it. If at a if between one session and another you don't know what to do, take a walk through the woods. Try really to diminish your distractions and bring the awareness to what you do. And I'm not saying to take a vow of silence, but try as much as possible to say and listen to what is necessary. What's beautiful is to eat in silence and be together with someone in silence. Of course, you can talk about anything and everything, but try as much as possible to not say what is unnecessary, because that way we slow down the speed of our thoughts. We let go of this agitation, and this will help us greatly when we try to meditate. Okay? So then we'll take a pause now, and we'll come back at 6:30.
Sada lamge yente rabzone dorje change kopan yurtoba sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shin yinsen takto delek pe koncho sumke chinge lobo koncho sumke ngodrubo tso koncho sumke
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Trashidele. We'll come back at 6:30. Thank you.